Today I'm talking with one of my favorite storytellers in the world, David Baldacci, and we're talking about a number of subjects. But I first want to start off by talking, and you have 110 million plus books in print, you're a writing machine. And I read a recent article in Fast Company, I think it was, where it was talking about you as the most productive person. And you said, I never miss a deadline, and yet you churn out book after book after book, and I can't wait for, thank you for taking the time, but don't delay any writing for me.
Okay.
Because I read all of your books. But I just want to delve into that area for a second. Share with us some of your tips on productivity. How do you do it? How do you maintain that kind of a pace?
Well, I think I've never looked at it as a job, so I don't have a set number of hours that I work during the day or a set number of words. It's part of my life. It's really a part of my lifestyle, so I'm thinking about it all the time. And when I finish a book, I don't say, thank God that's over, I'm going to go take 3 months off and go to the Caribbean. I'm always thinking about what's the next story. It's such a huge part of my life, and I spend a lot of time doing it, and I'm almost never away from it. So I am productive and prolific just because what else would I do with my time? The only time I'm really miserable is when I'm between stories, and I pace. I'm not really pleasant to be around. My wife tells me to go away for a while and then come back. But once I'm in the zone, I can write, in the course of a day, 5,000 words. I don't count words. The next day I might write none. The next day I write 10,000 words. So if it's the perfect place to write is in your head. It's not a physical space, and if you're in the zone, you can really, really roll.
So procrastination is not has never been your
I think
issue.
All writers tend to do that somewhat. When I procrastinate, I still try to do it in a very productive way. I'll go in and organize a space. And I like to be neat and organized. I think William Styron said, be neat and organized in your space so you can be aggressive and disorganized and chaotic in your work. But while I'm organizing space, whether it be a house or a room or a boat or whatever, it's almost like I'm building the plot brick by brick in my head. I'm thinking about the story, I'm building and I'm organizing in my head as I'm organizing things in real life. And then when I get back, the writer's block is gone, the procrastination is gone.
Well, let's go all the way back to, I'm always interested in the overnight success story.
Yeah.
So 1996 or so, Absolute Power comes out, movie, Clint Eastwood, the whole thing just explodes.
Right.
And yet I've read that you actually were writing, of course you were writing as a lawyer, and you're writing and writing and writing short stories for a long time. So how much of it was overnight success and how much of it was disciplined and getting ready?
Well, it was overnight in the extent that it took me 5,000 nights to get there. So if you count those all up as one, it's overnight success. But I started writing in a journal when I was a kid. My mom gave me a blank page journal. I was one of those kids who would just sort of talk, nonstop, yarns about whatever, stories, tall tales, usually get myself out of trouble with people. And finally, my mom went and got a journal. Hey, why don't you start writing some of this stuff down? I did. I loved it. I fell in love with putting, letters on a page. And years later, I thanked her, and she said, you know what? I just wanted you to shut the hell up. That's the only reason I gave you the journal. I was so tired. I just wanted a little peace and quiet, and I'm glad it worked out for you. But that was my motivation. And from there, I was trying to tell short stories to the New Yorker when I was 17. And if I had changed my name to J.D. Salinger, it might have been successful. I don't know, but I was just intrigued with the format, and I went from short stories to screenplay. I got lots of rejections for short stories, lots of rejections for screenplays. Finally, I got a screenplay agent. I had a script that looked like it was going to sell, and it didn't. And then I just said, what am I going to do? So I started writing novels, and I went through a few that I started and never finished because I just lost interest. And an idea for Absolute Power. I worked near the White House. I saw the Secret Service agents, the president, and I thought, let me sort of flip the moral stereotypes. I'll make the burglar, the good guy, and all the people usually associated as being good guys, sort of the villains, and see how that goes. And spent 3 years writing that. And I wrote in the middle of the night. I was a trial lawyer, and I worked long hours, but I would come home, spend time with the family, and then go down to my little cubby hole at 10 and write until 3 in the morning, and did that for about 11 years.
Did you ever mix and put some thriller writing into the middle of the briefs that you were writing?
I wrote very aggressively. And some of the best fiction I ever wrote was when I was a lawyer. I like to tell people that because as a trial lawyer, you're given the same set of facts. The trial record is the other side. So how can you be so diametrically opposed? Well, you emphasize certain facts, you de-emphasize other ones, you write a certain way.
Creative writing.
It's very creative writing.
Well, you've given great tips to parents who are now all going to get these journals and hand it to the kids to be quiet rather than the video games. Do you have any advice for an author, though, who's looking and saying, this spectacular career, he's never lost his motivation of continuing out new things? What advice do you have for an aspiring author?
I would say don't write necessarily what you know a lot about. Write about what you'd like to know a lot about. And because then you're going to go out and find out about things. You're going to have that passion. Publishers and agents have mounds of manuscript people see. And they look at them, they can tell within the first 10 pages, is this person really motivated about this material or not? Are they just chasing the next trend, you know? When Crichton wrote Jurassic Park, every screenplay and every book that was sent to agents and publishers was about dinosaurs. You know, when Dan Brown did Da Vinci Code, codes were the thing. So you're chasing trends. They don't need you because they have those guys already. Find something you're really passionate about and spend time working and developing it into something that's really creative and is you. Don't chase trends. And writing is Darwinism at its finest. If you're meant to be a writer, you will, because you will love it so much that you will stick with it through all the inevitable pain and frustration and rejections, mean-spirited rejections, or people will send you a rejection saying, this is crap, you should go find something else to do. If you're not meant to be a writer, that's a mortal wound and you're done. You're going to go, I quit. And I went through all of that for years, but I never quit because I could not live without it.
Interesting. Well, let's talk about your latest book, The Finisher. It is completely different. So you've left thriller writing a few times.
Yes.
Christmas Train, I Love Freddie and the French Fries. Right. You've done that before, but this is a very different book, and I'm halfway through it. It's intriguing. It's a fantasy world. What led you to write that? And I understand there's a backstory on how you got that published that I'm curious about.
Yeah, it was, it started with a journal. My wife gave me a journal on Christmas Day in 2008, and I took it in my little office and I wrote the name Vega Jane. And that's all I knew. I don't know where the name came from. I just wrote Vega Jane. And then for 4.5 years, it was fits and starts. I couldn't find the voice, the plot, the story, the characters. Nothing was working, and I just didn't know if this book was ever going to be finished or not. And then in June of 2012, because I'd really, when people say something just, I had an epiphany, really it's not an epiphany. You've been thinking about it subconsciously and it finally trickles to the top. And that's what happened with me. Everything clicked. And in June, from June 2012 until March of 2013, I wrote nearly 200,000 words on this manuscript. And it just came pouring out. And when it was done, I had given it to my agent. He didn't know he was even writing. Nobody knew I was writing other than my wife. My agent, we were at the London Book Fair, and I drew him aside at a party, and I said, I got something to tell you. What? I've been writing this book, this fantasy. He's like, where did this come from? So I sent it to him, and he read it, and he was like, oh my God, where did this come from? And I'd always known that I wanted to...
So you were meeting your deadlines all along for all the other books, and just secretly doing this one?
This was all totally on the side. Totally on the side. I said, I want to put it out to the publishers under a pseudonym. I don't want to use my real name because I want them to be excited about the book, not the chance that they might get to sign me. So I sent it out under the name Janus Pope. Janus is the two-faced god, looking forward and backwards, which was appropriate. And Pope was the Catholic thing. That was where that surname came from. And it went out. And Scholastic really, Rachel Griffiths, my editor, really was like, astounded by it. And she thought I was a Brit. Because the book is written in that sort of vernacular with that perspective and some of the language that I've used. And so they were very surprised when they found out it was me. And it was just, I was a fantasy reader as a kid, and as a thriller writer, you're sort of bound by earth rules. I can't just create powers and things. But I had a very vivid imagination as a kid, trust me.
I think you still do.
My mom would tell you about it. And I wanted to be unfettered in building this world. You can build fantasy worlds a couple of different ways. And you can build them big and scratch the surface. So you have this huge world and you just tell people a little things because you don't have time to do more than that. Or you can build this really small world with great depth. And I chose that way to do it. It's just a small village. It's this quag thing around it. The characters are finite. But they're told with great depth because I can focus a lot of page time on all of them. That's how I wanted to build this. And it's not really a dystopian novel. A lot of the really popular series are. They're perfectly free in Wormwood, and they go about their own business, if not in peace and security without much luxury. And in most other fantasy novels, sort of what the confrontation and what the other side is going to be. In this book, you will never find out because it's a series. And I like that idea too, where I just build this fantasy world little by little by little, but you get to know it so well that you can just start describing it in your head and quoting from it as well.
Well, it's interesting. I've interviewed a lot of writers, And many write and they don't know what's going to happen to the character, what's going to happen in the story. Your view in talking with you seems to be that you crystallize it so clear in your head and then the words come out.
It happens both ways now. I never know the ending of a novel before I start writing it. I don't outline the whole thing because I feel like then I'm hamstrung by the outline. And it's very clear to me, and has been over all the books that I've written, that I can have an idea for a book and the characters I want to be in it. But until I sort of jump into the story and start writing the story, I don't know what these characters are capable of. And I've had books where I thought one character was going to carry the narrative load, and all of a sudden there's another character going, it's like Hermione Granger, pick me, I'm a lot more interesting, develop me. And as a writer, you have to have the flexibility and latitude to say, you know what, it feels right to go with this character more than this character. So writing from an outline wouldn't allow you to do that. And then I would get up every day and think, okay, what am I writing today? What does the outline say? Okay, whatever. Wow, that's really, inspiring. So for me sometimes, while I do know directions the action's going to take at certain moments in the book, and I think about what I want to write about, the ending for me is just as intriguing as for a reader.
Interesting. Look, I want to switch gears and talk about literacy and libraries.
Yeah.
So literacy is near and dear to your heart. You
It is.
formed the Wishing Well Foundation with your wife.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about why you formed that and what work you've been up to.
Well, as a first-time novelist, I went on cross-country book tours. And a lot of the events that I went to over the first 5-6 years of my career were often Friends of the Library, sponsored library events, and a lot of them were had partnerships with literacy organizations. So you learn a lot about conditions on the ground. And I saw, two very stark Americas. I saw these discrete pockets of wealth and high education, and these huge pockets of no wealth and very little education. And that's not sustainable if you want to have, continue to have the greatest country on earth. If you want to have democracy where people are supposed to make informed decisions about who they vote for and things like that. It's a huge problem. And I know all the statistics, and they're all sort of very dire. And most of the money for adult literacy comes from private foundations. There's almost no spending on government dollars for that. And so we formed the Wishing Well Foundation, and we fund programs across the United States, and big, small, in between. They're all in the trenches, one-on-one tutoring, small communities. They might educate or, handle 20 people a year or 500 people a year. But those people will learn how to read, and instead of being sort of a drag on society with no opportunities, they can become thriving, independent, and an asset to society. It's our choice, and people complain about this whole political dichotomy about givers and takers and all that stuff. My philosophy is that you need to present everyone with opportunities and allow them to pursue those opportunities. And we can't say, well, these people aren't carrying their weight. Well, let's look at their situation. Their schools may be crap, and there may be one book for 30 people in one class. And you think that doesn't exist in the United States? It exists all over the United States. And people who grow up with very limited means have very limited opportunities. And so for us, it all starts with literacy. And I'm not talking about just reading a book for pleasure or even having a productive life. All the problems we have as a nation, everything from the economy to poverty to crime to civility, all comes back to that one thing. If more people could read at a higher level, those problems go away. And if we're going to just sort of keep spiraling down into a non-literate society, those problems are only going to get worse. I was talking with people whose job it is to predict prison populations, beds. They look at two factors, and they're almost 100% accurate, and they've used them for 40 years. It's scores on 4th grade reading tests and high school dropout rates. And they use those two factors to predict how many beds they're going to have.
It's amazing when you study the prison population, too, and you see words are so powerful. The more that they learn, it literally determines the course of their life.
It does, and people from limited circumstances, by the time they're 5 years old, might have heard their parents speak a total of 12 million words. From a more affluent, it's 45 million. That obviously has a huge impact.
Yeah. Literacy and libraries making a huge difference. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time so you can get back to writing the next thriller I can read. Thanks so much for talking with me.